Okay, so we know what aromatherapy is. What's an essential oil? Well, if we sniff the flower, we enjoy that familiar smell. What we're actually doing is breathing in essential oil molecules. We call these volatiles because they evaporate and they're packed full of millions of chemicals. Now, the average drop of essential oil contains, how many molecules do you think it might contain? The average drop of essential oil contains around 40 million trillion molecules. It's incredible, isn't it? If you want to write that down, you need 19 zeros. Now, if that were your body, your body has inordinately less. In fact, for every cell in your human body, an essential oil has 40,000 molecules for every cell. So by keeping them in a bottle with the lid on, we trap them. But when we take the top off, the air becomes saturated by these molecules. And so this is a concentrated essence, but it's important to remember that it's not the whole plant. Now that seems obvious because where's the petals? Where's the leaves? But I want to point this out and explain why this is important, because I want you to understand one of the key ways that people are being misled in the essential oil industry at the moment. I said to you earlier that an essential oil is mainly extracted by distillation, by steam distillation. So to understand, we need to kind of explain exactly how that works. So imagine the plant matter is in like a sieve, and steam's pushed up. So as it comes through the plant matter, the steam softens the oil content, and that gets trapped in the steam. And in the alembic, or the distillation process, the steam gets trapped at the top, complete with these oil molecules. So to separate them, we need to cool them. So the oil comes down like a coil that's usually sitting in cold water at the bottom. So as soon as it hits the cold, it cools, and steam, when it cools, turns to water, doesn't it? Now you will know yourself already that oil and water don't mix. So on the bottom we have the water, and on the top we have the oil. So this water at the bottom, we use that in aromatherapy too. It's called a hydrosol, or a hydrolat, or a floral water. I say hydrosol. So the most famous hydrosol that you have is rose water. You'll recognise that already. So if you were to take your rose water and you took the top off and you smelt it, what would you expect to smell? Would it be water, or would it be rosy? It'd be rosy, wouldn't it? And the reason for that is because some of the molecules haven't made it through the distillation to the oil. They're left in the water. That's what makes it beautiful. But this is what's important to understand, that not all components pass through distillation. So famously at the moment, there's lots of stories about how there is research into frankincense and how it can cure cancer. Certainly it does seem that when it's placed into a test tube, that frankincense resin can kill cancer cells. And so there's lots of research into what we can do with that. But the problem is that the active component, boswellic acid, is watery. It doesn't pass through the distillation. So while frankincense resin may be able to help cancer, the essential oil cannot. That's not to say we might not find out that it can in the future, but it's certainly not going to be that component that does it. Because oils are inordinately complex, we could find that there is another active component that we haven't noticed before. So what is it exactly in these essential oils that mean that they can help people? How is it that a plant has qualities that might be able to impact on a person's well-being? The truth is, we don't know. It might be that we're not that evolutionarily different as we seem to be, or it could be that we're evolutionarily similar, not to the plant, but perhaps to the insects and the things that act upon the plant. That does kind of make sense to me, because I've definitely dated some worms in my time. So interestingly, very few of the chemicals that we find in an essential oil are used by the plant for respiration. So that would mean for getting its nutrition or its basic needs. Most of what we refer to as secondary metabolites. So that is, after respiration has taken place, the chemicals it uses change into something else. And it's these secondary metabolites that make up most of an essential oil. For a long time, it was surmised that these built up inside of the tissues of the plant, because plants don't really have any kind of real excretory mechanism. So they'll get a build-up. But now scientists are starting to see nature in the same kind of way as we plant healers, and their theory now is much more magical. It relies on the fact that a plant can't move, that it's anchored to one place by its root. So that makes survival very difficult for it, doesn't it, when you think about it? It has to remain stationary while elements around it act upon it. So for example, caterpillar's got lots of legs, or butterfly's got lots of wings, but the plant has to just sit there and take this munching abuse. It doesn't really kind of feel very fair, doesn't it? And likewise, in the Himalayas, for example, in the biting wind, the herdsman moves the yaks off his field to protect his livestock, or in the sunshine, they find their own way to the shade. But in the midst of it, the plant's still sitting there, exposed to all these elements. And so plants developed mechanisms to survive these conditions. And every species does this, of course. It's survival of the fittest. So as a species, humans are an average of 4 inches taller than they were 100 years ago. And this always makes me laugh, because I live in a very ancient town, and most of the buildings here are 16th and 17th century. We've got a 12th century castle, and my husband's 6 foot tall. So don't ever go shopping with him, because the air goes blue as he bangs his head over and over and over again. But at 6 foot tall, he is taller than the average Englishman, who is 5'7". Now the average Guatemalan man is only 5'4". And so you can see that where you live can affect a variety of factors about you, and of course you can add skin, hair colour into that mix. Eskimos are a fascinating example. Because their nation has developed in the wind and snow, they have evolved a whole new layer of subcutaneous fats on their eyelids, just so that they can be protected against the wind and snow all the time. It's wonderful. And so in the same way, plants have developed these secondary metabolites to act as signalling mechanisms. They develop these as defences of bugs or any kind of challenges against their existence, but also as a way of propagating their species. A nice example is spotted knapweed, Centaurea stobi. It's a beautiful, pretty pink flower. It looks a bit like a thistle, and it looks gorgeous, but it's insidiously invasive. And it achieves this by deliberately sending out chemical substances through the soil to stop seeds from any other species from being able to germinate. It's clever, isn't it? So if you thought ethnic cleansing was a wholly human evil, think again. Spotted knapweed effectively forces everything around it to take a contraceptive. Now there's several different chemical groups that we find in that one single drop of oil, and they each have their own properties in humans too, which we'll look at later. But I want to tell you a little bit about one of the groups, and that's phenols. Now phenols are responsible for a plant's colour and of course its smell. And these are the botanical version of getting dressed up and all dolled up on a Saturday night to go out on the pool. They put on this beautiful, colourful show to persuade butterflies and bees and pollinators to come as often as they like. Used in human medicine, they're antimicrobial and antiseptic. So, phenols are just one of the chemical groups we'll learn about a little bit later, but there are lots and lots more. But phenols are quite a large molecule. The terpene group, again we'll learn about those, are very small. In particular, the smallest ones, sesquiterpenes, are really, really small. And this makes them very useful because they're able to get into places that perhaps they shouldn't really be, like whizzing around the brain, for example. Brains are really, really insulated organ, and it's the fortress of the skull protecting it to keep nasty bacteria out. And there's a barrier between the blood and the organ, and we call this the blood-brain barrier. Now, as safeguarding goes, this is Fort Knox and some. Blood-brain barrier is so tightly meshed that doctors can't treat brain cancers with chemotherapy because the molecules in chemotherapy are too big to pass through this mesh. They're quite effectively kept out and sent on their way. Sesquiterpenes, though, are so tiny that they're able to